Uhuru. Uhuru. Uhuru, and welcome to Black Power Blueprint Live. We are broadcasting here not only from our Facebook page, but we're also here in St. Petersburg, Florida, in the beautiful Uhuru House. And we want you to please subscribe on YouTube if you want to see this on YouTube and get notifications. You can also like the Black Power Blueprint Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Please share this live stream far and wide. My name is Jamie Simpson from the Black Power Blueprint Reparations Committee, and I'm here at the beautiful Uhuru House on 18th Avenue South in St. Petersburg, Florida. Tonight we have the honor of having with us from St. Louis, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, leader of the African People's Socialist Party and Uhuru Movement. Uhuru. Uhuru. We salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela. He is the leader of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, founder of the African People's Socialist Party and African People's Solidarity Committee. And as white people, we are organized under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And we want to give a big Uhuru and welcome to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Welcome, Chairman. Uhuru. Uhuru. Also with us tonight is the director of Agitprop from the African People's Socialist Party, and someone who ran for city council last year as an Uhuru movement a year ago today as a candidate on a platform calling for radical times, radical solutions. Uhuru Comrade Director Akile Anayi. And also with us here in St. Petersburg is Penny Hess, who is representing the African People's Solidarity Committee.
Uhuru, Jamie, and Uhuru, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. It is such an honor to have you on the program tonight. Uhuru, I also want to salute Director Akile Anayi and being able to be Chairman Omali Yeshitela tonight and this whole of the movement of Marcus Garvey that is being carried out by the African People's Socialist Party. And we are here, Jamie and I are here, as Jamie said, as part of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. I'm the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people organized under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, which is fighting for one thing, and that is the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere, the return of the stolen resources, land, brilliant science, everything that African people have been robbed of in the process of building the system that we live on and sit on the pedestal of the oppression of African people. And, you know, we're here building solidarity and reparations with the Black Power Blueprint Project in St. Louis, and it's a program of the African People's Socialist Party that is acquiring property in the north side of St. Louis, which is a completely African community, a very impoverished African community. It is reversing the onslaught of gentrification. It is returning buildings and property into the hands of the African working class, and projects that bring political and economic power to the hands of the African working class. Projects that have been taken on with the support of so many people who are participating tonight. And who have, over the last 9 months now, contributed more than $50,000 towards these projects, which have been carried out, which I also want to salute Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela, who has been putting the vision of Chairman Omali Yeshitela on the ground and making it into reality, rapidly transforming the buildings and the work with the participation of African contractors, skilled workers, and volunteers from the African community and from the North American, sometimes from the North American community as well, as part of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So, we want to really say that this whole Black Power Blueprint is a program, the only program on the planet today that, one, continues the legacy of Marcus Garvey, which we will be talking about tonight, a movement of African people, the largest organization of African people that's ever existed on the planet Earth, with up to 11 million Africans around the world. That's historic, and it has been in many ways written out of history. It has left an indelible imprint on the African community. It was all over the United States and on the continent of Africa, the Caribbean, and other places as well. And the African People's Socialist Party is the only organization that is continuing this. And we're going to show how that is true tonight.
Absolutely.
So I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, I am too. Really thrilled with our illustrious guests tonight and the incredible projects of the Black Power Blueprint. We also, again, want to from all of you who have contributed to a total of more than $55,000 for this project. Now, currently we are raising $20,000 by the end of the year to help fund the renovation of a 4-plex apartment building that is happening as we speak to house workers from the African Independence Workforce Program. The installation of a 50-foot flagpole for a giant African flag, the flag that was voted on by the Marcus Garvey movement, and paving, lighting, and landscaping of the empty lots, expanding the community garden, and so much more. So far, we've raised $4,425,000 toward our,
$4,425.
Yeah, $4,425.
In this phase, yeah.
Towards our $20,000 goal, right? So over 20% there. And you can go to blackpowerblueprint.org and donate and make your reparations payment or support this program by going to blackpowerblueprint.org. And tonight we have a goal. We want to raise $1,000 tonight and get us over the $5,000 mark.
Absolutely. And that is going to see real results. And we can put that in. So go to blackpowerblueprint.org, put in your reparations, your contribution. Contributions towards this are coming in from all over the world, including from Africans in other parts of the world, from all kinds of people, and from many, many white people or North Americans, even white people from Australia, in fact, who want to have a principled stand in relationship to African people and the oppressed and colonized peoples on the planet Earth, to be on the forward side of history. So tonight we are talking about the similarities in the work, the approach, and the goals of the African People's Socialist Party and the Marcus Garvey movement. The Black Power Blueprint Project in St. Louis being just one example of the kind of projects that take the struggle of African people beyond protest and into the quest for power economically and politically, for self-government. The African People's Socialist Party, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela has called the party the 21st century Garveyites. Marcus Garvey, and we want to say for anybody who is not clear or doesn't know who Marcus Garvey is, was born in Jamaica in 1887. And that's just 22 years after the end of legal chattel enslavement. And Marcus Garvey came to the US in 1916, and he settled in Harlem, New York, which at the time housed one of the largest concentrations of African people in the US. Garvey built his Liberty Hall, which seated 6,000 people on 135th Street in Harlem. Garvey's slogan was Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. And his organization was the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, or UNIA-ACL. All around Liberty Hall in Harlem, this was he came in 1916, by 1919, he had many of these institutions going. He built so rapidly. He was a young man, and he tapped into the fervor of African people in that period to be free, to be liberated, to have their own continent of Africa, something that, a desire and a will that to make that happen continues even today. So all around Liberty Hall were African-owned Garvey movement businesses, including a movement restaurant, a grocery store, a hotel, a university, a loan company. There was also a doll factory that created African dolls, the record studio, the headquarters of the Black Star steamship line, and so many other things. And there's actually a place on the internet that if you Google Garvey's institutions of the UNIA, it shows you a map and shows you where these were in Harlem. It's very powerful to see that. So similar institutions or economic institutions of the Garvey movement thrived all over the US and the Caribbean and the world, also Central America and South America, Panama, many other places where African people are all around the world. And Garvey led, as we said, a movement of 11 million African people from all over the planet. He had over 900 branches in the US, Africa, the Caribbean, and South America.
Wow.
Also in Australia and, many other, I think India, many other places as well. Garvey was attacked, and we'll talk about this tonight, by not only by white communists, by the African petty bourgeoisie, and the US government, who imprisoned him and released him from the federal prison in Atlanta only after 150,000 African people demonstrated in Harlem in what is today called the Marcus Garvey Park, demanding his release. And Garvey was deported, though, and died in 1940. His birthday is August 17th, and his annual month-long convention of the Negro people of the world was always held in the month of August. So that is one of the reasons why we are discussing this in the month of August. And just to say that, like Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Marcus Garvey never doubted that African people will be free. And when faced with death, imprisonment, and attacks on the movement of African people, Garvey stated, quote, "When I am dead, wrap the mantle of the red, the black, and the green around me for a new life. I shall rise up to lead the millions to the heights of triumph. Look for me in the whirlwind or the storm. Look for me all around you. I shall come back with countless millions of Black men and women who have died in America, those who have died in the West Indies, and those who have died in Africa, to aid you in the fight for liberty, freedom, and life," unquote. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela was born in 1941, just a year after Garvey's death. And the chairman embodies the same zeal and tireless struggle to finish what Garvey started before him, to collusion, to be able to be the embodiment of Garvey in the whirlwind, to vindicate all those African people who were slaughtered for white power and colonialism, to liberate Africa and African people and get the return of all the stolen resources of African people once and for all. The African People's Socialist Party was formed by the chairman in 1972, and the chairman and the party has continued the struggle for the past 46 years and multiple fronts, building power in the hands of the African working class. On October 6th to 12th, the party will hold its 7th Congress in St. Louis. So really want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela again for being on this interview tonight. It's very much of an honor. And I want to turn it over to Director Akile Anayi.
Uhuru. Uhuru, well, I just really want to appreciate that overview from Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African Solidarity Committee, and just to say that it is also a profound honor to be a part of this webinar this evening, and commend the work of the Black Power Blueprint Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela, and to be able to interview my leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is the literal embodiment of Marcus Garvey in the current day. And it is my honor to interview Chairman. And I'm going to start with this first question. Chairman, the scholar Tony Martin, whose books on Garvey you often recommend, wrote in the beginning of his book called Race First, published in 1976, saying about Marcus Garvey, quote, "This book is based on the simple premise that no one could have organized and built up the largest Black mass movement in history in the face of continuous onslaughts from communists on the left, Black reactionaries on all sides, and the most powerful governments in the world, and yet be a buffoon or a clown or even an overwhelmingly impractical visionary. Distortions are not new to Afro-American history, but one would be hard put to find a major Black figure who has suffered more at the hands of historians and commentators as Marcus Garvey. Chairman, as the party and you have been really important in rescuing the legacy of Marcus Garvey from the vicious white nationalist slander of the US government, white academia, white leftists, and the African petty bourgeoisie, and even those forces who would make Garvey into a kind of metaphysical hero. Could you speak to that and to who Marcus Garvey was in reality and how the party continues his legacy? Uhuru.
Uhuru. Well, first of all, I think it's really important to say that Garvey lives, that the US and other imperialists around the world, that the African petty bourgeois and assimilationists fail to destroy this incredible movement, that it was really important for them to distort and undermine and do everything they can to keep the ideas of Marcus Garvey away from, certainly from the African people, and I think from people in general. And so Garvey lives, and we do this work to not in order to have some kind of false emulation of Marcus Garvey, but because Garvey was correct in terms of his recognition of the fundamental contradictions that African people are confronted with, and that their ruling class and all the sycophants and all of the African petty bourgeois who would find their fortune here in the United States, even after the several hundred years of oppression and exploitation of our people, they have failed. And the truth is that they would not want people to know about Marcus Garvey. And Garvey was not about simple marches and simple demands. In fact, he was a part of an era in history where the oppressed peoples of the world were rising up. Garvey was an anti-imperialist, and I think that's really important for us to understand. He was not just some black guy who made speeches and just who even just created doll factories. He was an anti-imperialist, and his contemporaries included people like Ho Chi Minh and who actually attended meetings at Liberty Hall in New York. You're talking about attended meetings of Marcus Garvey. You're talking about people like Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata, and you're talking about Garvey being a contemporary of Sun Yat-sen from China, who has been considered as one of the major forces leading to the advent of a liberated, unified China. You're talking about somebody who actually, whose newspaper actually contributed to the efforts of the Sandino movement, the movement of Augusto Sandino in Nicaragua. So he was not some mythological force. He was an anti-imperialist who, and I think it's important to say that. And Garvey came about, his movement, the Universal Negro Improvement and African Communities League, came about as a really important moment in history, when all of the peoples and that I just mentioned and more were engaged in a struggle to get white power off their backs. And the institutions that he built were institutions that contributed to self-determination. They were not just some institutions, but they were a part of the war, part of the struggle to become, for African people to become a self-determining people again. Because most people do not even understand that Africa and African people were free before this assault on Africa by Europe, by white people that raised Europe and white people to this incredible stature of grandeur at the expense of the life, liberty, resources of Africa and African people and most people around the world. I think it's important that we remember that Marcus Garvey, the movement in 1917, you're talking about the Marcus Garvey establishes headquarters in Harlem in 1916, 1917. Of course, there was success of a Bolshevik revolution in Russia. And Garvey sent letters of congratulation to Lenin and Trotsky at that time because he believed in liberation and freedom of oppressed and exploited people all around the world. And I think that it's important to understand that the world was undergoing a tremendous transformation during the era of Marcus Garvey, just as what is occurring here today. And today, when we're having this discussion, we're looking at an imperialism of white power that was born off enslaving African people and enslaving people in Nicaragua and enslaving people in Mexico, where they're even talking about walls and have already created borders and enslaving people in Palestine. All of these things that were happening then, people were fighting then, and it's happening today. And but today, that the whole system is in a state of dire crisis. It's in a fundamental state of crisis. And it's really important, if you look at what's currently going on, how the U.S. and is calling on people to cry crocodile tears because of the recent death of Senator John McCain, who they have declared to be this great American hero. And in fact, they used the death of McCain as a part of a struggle against that's happening within the ruling class itself to undermine Donald Trump. Because they raised McCain up as a hero, and he was an opponent of Trump. And Trump had attacked McCain on more than one occasion. It is part of a whole process to neutralize and undermine Trump. And they're even talking about renaming an institution in Washington, D.C., changing it from Dick. I forgot what old Dickie's name was, but Malcolm X talked about him as being Tricky Dicky, a Klansman. And fittingly, to name the building for McCain. Now, this is really important because McCain is being declared a hero. And the guy who wants to change the name of this institution, this building for McCain is none other than the liberal Schumer out of New York. McCain is a Republican reactionary, so much so that he frightened some Africans in the United States who call themselves communists and revolutionaries because they saw him as contending with Obama and that for the elections for president, and considering the possibility of McCain's victory leading to the advent of fascism in the United States. This is how he was regarded. But he's this great hero. And McCain was no hero. McCain was a murderer. And I want to say this quite clearly, and I'm saying it because that the whole system is in a state of crisis today. And today it's much more difficult to hold up murderers as heroes than it was a few years ago. And we got to remember that McCain is considered a hero because he was a so-called war. He was a captive by the Vietnamese people, a prisoner of war. And we have to remember that McCain was shot down on his 24th mission of bombing Vietnamese children, men, women, villages, and what have you. And that this is the hero that they are celebrating, this murderer, this person who was killing children and women and who participated in the process that used Agent Orange, defoliated much of Vietnam. People are still suffering the consequences of that even today. Marcus Garvey, as I mentioned, Ho Chi Minh from Vietnam actually attended meetings in Liberty Hall that were held by Marcus Garvey. He was a friend of African people, and the Vietnamese people were friends of African people even during the struggle that they were engaged in against McCain and the American empire. This is a state of the crisis. So McCain is a hero. And Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill was a hero. He's the guy who was an Indian killer. He was a slave owner. And now they're talking about putting, is it Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman on the other side of the $20 bill. And that's something that was pushed by white feminists somehow. And regardless of what they say they're doing, the objective, of course, is to give legitimacy to a slave owner, Indian killer person. Kit Carson is a hero. He was Thomas Jefferson, who was a rapist, a pedophile, raped little African girls and what have you. 13-year-old Sally Hemings, who had babies from him. He is a hero. This is the what we're looking at in terms of the status, the state of bourgeois, imperialist, colonial morality, a whole social system built off slavery, built off oppression, built off colonialism. And McCain is a part of that, was a part of that. So you can debate whether the flag should be lowered at half-mast or not. McCain was a killer. He was a murderer. And all colonized peoples of the world experienced that. And they're talking about how badly he was treated in Vietnam. He's lucky to have come back alive. He couldn't drop those bombs in North St. Louis and get captured and then walk away and talk about it. He couldn't do that in the Fifth Ward of Houston, Texas, drop bombs and then walk away as if that was something okay, and then be allowed to be declared a hero because he stood up for American values. And of course, he did stand for American values, and I think that's important. But the crisis of imperialism is also reflected in what's supposed to be the scandal surrounding the Catholic Church and the Pope. And it reminds me so much of the Me Too movement, where suddenly white women have discovered that white men are rapists. When you look at my community and you see African children, people who all these complexions as a consequence of rape by white men, and how Europe raped Africa, Europe raped the Americas and what have you. Rape has been something that they've done all the time. And right now you have a situation where the Pope some are calling for the resignation of the Pope. Of course, you had a resignation of the Pope in 2013, the first in 600 years, because of the scandal that surrounded the Vatican Bank and what was happening to all that money that they're stealing from it. All poor people all around the world coming to the Vatican Bank, and these thugs, criminals, that Catholic officers stealing the money, stealing the resources. And so there's a whole scandal around that. And then, of course, you have a situation where just in Pennsylvania alone, more than 1,000 children have been raped by more than at least 300 Catholic priests. And they're talking about the cover-up and how this is supposed to be some kind of new discovery. That's just in Pennsylvania. Just think about that. This is an international operation, the Catholic Church. And when the Pope was just in Ireland, which is a Catholic entity, Catholic country, people were booing him, turning their backs on him, etc. And white people are going through a real trauma now as a consequence of what's happening and what's being revealed. But people knew, or they should have known, just like people should have known that white men were rapists. Look at what the Catholic Church has done. The Catholic Church played a role in actually legitimizing slavery, the enslavement of African people. You want to talk about rape? The Pope did that. And the Pope was involved, and the Catholic Church has been involved in kidnapping little children, whether they were so-called Indian children, to remake them, whether they were children in the Philippines, Africa, and what have you. And now the only things that we're talking about in terms of the rapes by the Catholic priests are those rapes that's occurred in Europe and in white America. But think about it, that this rape has been happening all around the world. And if you had a country, any other country than a white country, they use as a pretext of attacking Syria, attacking Libya, because they were somehow brutalizing their own people. Look at the Catholic Church, a rotten, filthy institution that is the high ground, the actual essence of morality, of Western morality, that is embedded in the Catholic Church, the first Christian church, if you will. And yet this is the morality that justifies killing 13-year-old children in this country, Mike Brown, and killing a man who's selling a cigarette These murderers, the Catholic Church was like the advanced guard, the vanguard coming into all of these places and attacking the belief systems of oppressed peoples around the world as part of the process of oppressing them. And now we say, oh, the Pope knew of the rape that was happening. Of course, the Pope knew. The Pope is a rapist. And this is the stuff that's been happening forever. So that's why it's really important for people to understand that when you support Black Power Blueprint, you're not just supporting some concept. This is no charity work. This is a part of the process that was begun by Marcus Garvey against a system that breeds the McCains, that breeds what the Catholic Church has done. And the Catholic Church and McCain could do no different because they stand on a foundation of slavery and colonialism. Slavery and colonialism must go. And the economic component of this struggle, this political struggle that we're talking about, the political struggle that the African People's Socialist Party, the African Socialist International, the movement to bring African people together under one leadership once again, and to be able to feed, clothe, and house African people. This is the struggle to overturn a social system based on parasitism and genocide. So we talking about we just want $1,000, but this is a call. We can do this many times over. You must do this many times over because you want to see that day of McCainism, of the stuff that the Catholic Church, the Pope, and whole white society that rests upon the genocide and murder of the rest of us. You want to see that gone. And so we need to see resources coming because we are the vanguard. We are the advanced attachment of the human struggle to overturn a kind of social system based on genocide and based on colonialism and based on slavery. And this is your opportunity to participate in right now just building the Black Power Blueprint, but spreading this everywhere. Because if you look at the Catholic Church and you look at what they're doing with McCain, part of what they're doing with McCain, in addition to fighting among themselves to undermine Trump, part of what they're doing to McCain is making some kind of hero out of a murderer. They are justifying colonialism and imperialism. So to support McCain is to support imperialism. It's to support colonialism. And so that's what they're asking you to do. We're asking you to fight against McCain, fight against colonialism, fight against what the Pope and the Catholic Church and the whole Western civilization, if you will, has become as a consequence of slavery and colonialism. You couldn't get a different product than what you got with the Catholic Church and what you got with McCain as a consequence of slavery and colonialism. Uhuru.
Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Amazing. Just on the point of the resources and reparations, if you're a white person like Penny and myself watching this, you can go to blackpowerblueprint.org and do as Comrade Ali just did, who put in 100.
No, I'm sorry. It's Janice Kant.
Janice Kant.
$50.
$50 tonight.
And Casey Mackey, $75 tonight.
All right, Comrade.
And I want to put in $50 as well. And I just, in unity with everything the chairman just laid out, you know, just taking the struggle, the decay of imperialism that the chairman is talking about tonight, and the ability to stand on the forward side of history, to be part of something positive, that we have the opportunity to do that under the leadership of the African working class, to be part of a world in which all human beings can live and in which there is reparations and state power that is not about oppressing anybody, but enabling the entire world to live in peace, no one at the expense of anybody else. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org and donate, give reparations, turn over the resources back over to African people, and be able to be part of a future in which all human beings can live.
Right. Thank you to anyone who's donated so far. Please continue to do so. Share far and wide. I'm going to put in $30 tonight towards the project. So whatever you're able to do, if you can do the $1,000, do $1,000. If you can do $50, do $50.
So we have, I think we only have $795 to go. So we can do this.
Yes.
We can do this. What the chairman said, this is just nothing. This is a drop in the bucket, but I want to turn it back over to Dr. Akile to continue the discussion with Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
All right, so Chairman, we're going to go back to, we're going to mention Tony Martin again in his book, Race First. And he says, Marcus Garvey, unlike his major rivals in the United States, built a mass organization that went beyond mere civil rights agitation and protest and based itself upon a definite, well thought out program that he believed would lead to the total emancipation of African people from white domination. Martin could have written the exact same words about you and the African People's Socialist Party. And could you comment on this?
I think that's absolutely right. And we got to talk about the fact that we're talking about, Martin is writing about something that happened more than 100 years ago. Yet today, we have a situation where the so-called white left are quick to jump out of the box going Black Lives Matter, quick to have a demonstration that might block for 50 minutes or 30 minutes or 10 minutes an interstate someplace, quick to denounce racism and to demand that $15 per hour after a certain period of time on the one hand, but they will not support liberation for African people. And that's the fundamental question. And that's why it's hard to find anything about Garvey, because Garvey talked about African people being a free people, independent people in control of our own lives and control of our own destiny, making sure that our children will have a future because we would stop simply producing wealth and life and value for the white world and begin to corral that wealth and value for ourselves, that the labor of African people would go toward producing for ourselves, and that the resources that's been stolen from us will be returned. And what white people have a responsibility to do, of course, is to join in on this struggle, because this is a struggle to overturn not just a legacy of bad doing, but to create a new kind of world. Because what we are recognizing, what we are seeing constantly is that there are a lot of white people who are trying to find a way out of this, and they try to look for the easy way by seeing a Bernie Sanders or something to that effect that doesn't actually touch the social system. And what we are saying is that you can't have any different outcome than McCain, than the Catholic Church, than Trump, given the kind of social system that we're looking at. I mean, the room for maneuverability to maneuver within that system is extraordinarily limited and already predetermined. We have to do something different. And so we are calling on you to participate in doing that different thing and building that different world that has to be built. And when you look at this movement of simply Black Lives Matter or hands up, don't shoot, etc., it's like going back beyond 100 years. It's like retrogression. To fight a civil rights struggle at a time where the world is demanding liberation, the whole world is demanding liberation, of course, is totally unacceptable. So we are a part, like Garvey, of constructing the future. That's what we do. We're not simply talking about protesting conditions today. We're talking about constructing the future. And we're inviting everybody who believes in a future of free people to participate in helping to construct that future. But we remind you and we warn you that the thing that stands between the people and the future is a rotten, foul social system of imperialist white nationalism, of imperialism, colonialism, and they will not tolerate this struggle that we are making. They won't accept it easily. That's why Garvey went to prison. That's why our children are maimed in the streets of America today, either by hunger, hopelessness, or oppression, or police killings, or horizontal violence that comes as a consequence of a whole population being kept in cages. That's why they keep Garvey from us, because if we knew of Garvey, if we knew of the African People's Socialist Party, if we could see this future, and even as we have this discussion, we are aware that the ruling class is in such a tenuous situation that they don't even pretend that there's such a thing called free speech anymore. That even as we have this discussion, you know, you've got the rulers talking about how people complaining about the oppression of Africans and the oppression of Mexicans and the oppression of the indigenous people somehow represent some kind of Russian plot to divide the American population, to undermine our great democracy. They use this scam. And so that the likelihood even of Facebook and all of these other entities that we have assumed to be available to us to communicate to each other, even that's on shaky ground. I'm saying that civil rights won't do it. In fact, we have to become quite uncivil. We have to talk about creating a whole different kind of society. And the process of developing Black Power Blueprint gives everybody an opportunity to create the new world that we have to have, so that human beings can live in dignity and human beings can stand up and look each other in the eye as equals, as opposed to what we have now, this relationship that white people have with the rest of us, where we function as slaves and slave masters, and where any kind of resistance is seen as some kind of horrible threat and crime. So the Pope can commit crimes, the Catholic Church can commit crimes, all around the world. McCain and the United States government can bomb innocent people like Vietnam, like Yemen, that's happening today. And they are innocent and good Americans and what have you. And they represent the morality of so-called Western imperialism, while the rest of us are supposed to live forever like this. And every move that we make continues to be questioned by our good friends, the liberals and the African petty bourgeoisie that has consigned itself to a permanent relationship to imperialism as footstools for white power. So this period of simply protest is over. We talk about Black Power Blueprint because we're talking about constructing a future. And Black Power Blueprint, the work that's happening right here in St. Louis, the work that we are doing in places like South Africa, the work that we plan to do in Kenya, the work that we are organizing African people all over Europe, the work that we are trying to do, pulling Africans together in the Caribbean, is the work that Garvey did. And this is the work that promises a new future, as opposed to trying to live within the constraints of colonial capitalism or modern 21st century slavery.
Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
So powerful. And we want to thank some people who have taken a stand of reparations tonight, and a stand of contributing to the right of Africa, including Marnie Bell Ferguson, $5 with donation. So we want to salute Marnie, and that puts us at only $790 to go. We also have a recurring donation that came in earlier today from Bruce Mahile de Comé, and he is an African man from Ivory Coast who lives in France. He's giving $25 a month as well, and we're counting that towards our goal today. So that would be that we only have 765 more to go. And we want to salute Allison Haney from Philadelphia, who put in $50, so we only have 700. I think this is a little bit wrong, but we only have 715 more to go. So just really want to say, uhuru, we can raise $715. We have Kitty Riley, $30. So we have 685 to go. And we can do this. We're going to do this because there are, as the chairman said, white people who are looking for a way out, who want to end this parasitic relationship that we have to everybody else that is killing the world, killing human beings every single day, that is giving us stolen resources that just to fill our stomachs and pocketbooks, which is a world, a life of nothing, a nothing. It is a dead end that leads to alcoholism, that leads to drug addiction, that leads to alienation from the majority of the planet on Earth, the people on the planet, and to only living a life in which we are complicit with this government, with what it does to African people every single day, to the people of Yemen that the chairman mentioned, the Palestinian people, the oppressed and colonized peoples around the world, again, on whose backs we sit. And this is no life at all. And this is the place to be. This is where we can take a stand for reparations, which is not an act of charity. It is a stand. It is a commitment. It is a commitment to end this parasitic capitalism. It is that we have, it must be returned to African people. That is the meaning of redistributing the wealth of the world. It must go back into the hands of African people. This land must go back into the hands of the indigenous people. This system has to come to an end. And the Black Power Blueprint is about changing the world. It is not charity. It is not a favor. It is changing the world. And it gives us the chance as white people to be part of something really positive, a world that ends white power and opens up a future, just an incredible future, that without that, we will see the destruction of every single form of life, on this planet, that this system is about rape and destruction. So we salute the Black Power Blueprint and Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org. Please give whatever you can tonight. Take a stand of reparations, put it on your credit card, whatever's needed, your debit card. Go ahead and turn over the stolen resources and watch this incredible growth. It's almost on fast forward, this incredible growth and development of the Black Power Blueprint before your very eyes. Uhuru.
Uhuru. All right, so we're getting back to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The next question is, Chairman, in your political report to the 7th Congress that you have been reading chapter by chapter, which has been live streamed on Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern from your Facebook page, you take on and defeat anyone who would try to uphold W.E.B. Du Bois and the African petty bourgeoisie over the African working class, and those who would try to uphold the Black Belt South position. You wrote, and I quote, "The party's position has actually been tested in the real world. There was a time when the African masses had the opportunity to choose between the Black Belt South line, integrationism or assimilation, and the movement of Marcus Garvey. The test with Garvey was made by the CP supported, by the Communist Party supported African Blood Brotherhood and the Pan-Africanist project of W.E.B. Du Bois. The masses overwhelmingly chose Garvey." Can you talk about the importance of this struggle today?
I think it's extremely important because the struggle continues even now. And this is, again, part of the war that's been made against the ideas of Marcus Garvey in terms of the attempt to unite all African people. We are one dispersed nation everywhere. That's why we are getting recruits from Brazil. And it's really interesting because you talk about Brazil. This is one of the first places the Pope gave Portugal permission to engage in slavery. And of course, Portugal enslaved African people in this land in what they call South America that's inhabited by so-called Brazilians. So we're getting recruits from Brazil. That's why Comrade African from Ivory Coast, who's living in France, is coming home too, because we want our Africa back. All of us want our Africa back, and we wanted it back then. And what, of course, when I say then, I mean 100 years ago, when Garvey made the demand, Africa for Africans at home and abroad. And this where an open debate was happening between white imperialist countries around the world in what was then called the League of Nations, which was a precursor or the first attempt to build what is now the United Nations, where white countries had decided that they were going to manage the world and black people and colonized people, and they were sharing among themselves who was going to get what. And it was Garvey who stood up and said, Africa for Africans, those at home and abroad. And that was something that was recognized as viable, valid. That's why more than 50,000 people came to the convention that they held at Madison Square Garden in New York. So many people that the garden couldn't hold them, that they had to set up speakers so that people outside, thousands of Africans who had come from all around the world, could hear, because Africans want our Africa back, and we want our unity back. We want our relationship with each other back. So Garvey was there. And Du Bois, who was with the NAACP that Garvey referred to as the National Association for the Advancement of Certain People. And he did that because he was raising the class struggle that was represented by Du Bois, the petty bourgeois force, who had nothing but contempt and disdain for the working class, and who had said previously that black people couldn't even live in Africa that Garvey was holding up. Black people in the United States couldn't live there. We couldn't tolerate living there, and who bragged to U.S. officials that he was working hand in glove with colonial powers in Europe with his Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania. And so it's not like there was a period where Du Bois was off in a corner and Garvey was off in a corner. They were contentions. That Garvey led this movement, and Du Bois did everything he could to wreck it. And he worked with the United States government, and he engaged in the Garvey Must Go campaign, along with the Communist Party USA. And they worked to destroy the Garvey movement. And so then you had the African Blood Brotherhood, who was funded by the Communist Party USA also, and that they used to the Communist Party at a time when there were only 50 members, Africans in the Communist Party. They sent their members into the African Blood Brotherhood, who they funded and put forward with this whole concept of the the Black Belt South nation. And so you had, who was headed by this African Blood Brotherhood, was headed by a man named Cyril Briggs, who for a minute worked with Garvey, thought he could take over the Garvey movement. Failing to do that, became a serious enemy of Garvey. And the point that I'm making is that Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, African fundamentalism, as it was characterized by Garvey, existed side by side with the NAACP, assimilationist politic of W.E.B. Du Bois, who put forth the whole proposition concept of the talented 10th, the most talented, most educated, the wealthiest sector of the African population being in control of the rest of us for imperialism. And then you had W.E. Du Bois and the Pan-Africanist movement. And W.E.B. Du Bois built the Pan-Africanist Congress as a part of a process to fight against and overturn the Garvey movement. So, and the masses, millions of people joined Garvey. They did not join Du Bois. In fact, the only time the Pan-Africanist Congress had a mass turnout was in 1945 in Manchester, after they had succeeded in crushing the Garvey movement. And became a success because there were so many workers who worker organizations from throughout the African world who happened to be in Europe at the time, where Du Bois, with the leadership of George Patmore, participated in organizing the Pan-Africanist Congress in Manchester. My point is that when Africans had an opportunity to make a choice, they always chose Garvey. They chose the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African fundamentalism. They chose Africa for Africans at home and abroad, as opposed to some Black Belt South contrivance, as opposed to some integrationist movement that was put forth by W.E.B. Du Bois. We won the struggle one time in the past, and so we just continue to have to fight this thing until imperialism is dead, because until it's dead, it's going to always put forth these false solutions for African people. You have an opportunity to participate in making sure that this victory can be won quickly. And you should give whatever you can give, because there are people who are your contemporaries, your peers, who are not only giving money to groups like the NAACP and the Urban League to help pacify the situation. You got people like Soros, who are putting all kinds of money into false solutions for the people. And of course, the United States government itself offering up false solutions. Those of us who unite with this project are in opposition to all those efforts that's being made to cover for imperialism and to contain the status quo. We want to change that. We want to overturn the status quo, and you have to want that too. And as all these other resources, and sometimes they've been your resources or your mother's resource, your parents' resources, have gone to the American government, have gone to these other institutions supposed to help the poor Negroes, with the white people who love us, you know, as Robert Sobukwe used to call them, who sit on our backs and then cry, oh, I feel so bad for what's happening to you. I really don't like it. And but they never get off our backs. And right here in St. Louis, where I'm located, there are people on the board of all white women who are part of the board of all the persons who at the drop of a hat would join a protest march and hold up signs saying Black Lives Matter on the one hand, but they oppose to the efforts to bring Black power to St. Louis. They oppose to, they unite with this effort to cut the number of wards in St. Louis in half, to cut in half the ability of African people, more than half, to capture even electoral political power, and they make it necessary now for anybody they're trying to make it necessary for anybody who wants to run for office to cover such a larger territory that the white ruling class money is going to be necessary for them to get elected, and knocking out the potential for the African working class to even claim power. They don't have it now, but they have the ability to claim it as long as these 28 wars exist. I'm saying that this is the stuff in the real world that we're up against. Just like Garvey was up against a real contest. This is not some liberal discussion group about stuff, what sounds better, or some idealistic struggle of evil versus good and stuff. We're talking concretely of building institutions and programs for actual liberation. And you can join this because Africans everywhere coming together to take back our Africa, take back our freedom, and take back our future for ourselves and for our children. And you can be a part of that, because this process is what's going to take down the whole capitalist blood-sucking system that is based on stealing resources from other people and exploiting the labor of even everybody in this country and around the world.
Uhuru. We will come back to this powerful discussion on Marcus Garvey with Chairman Omali Yeshitela very shortly. And quick salute for that amazing overview. Thank you, Chairman Omali.
And salute to Director Kile for such a great interview. And we're coming back to this in just a minute.
We are raising resources here. We're putting our money where our mouth is tonight for the Black Power Blueprint, the project that is making real in this period what Garvey built 100 years ago. African power and self-government, self-determination led by the African working class. And a reminder to all to go to blackpowerblueprint.org, and that we are raising $1,000 tonight for the Black Power Blueprint. And we have a few announcements to make.
Yes, we have some people to thank and salute for a stand of reparations. We have Kitty Riley, $30 tonight. Say Uhuru.
Uhuru.
We have Frankie K, $20.
Right.
Uhuru.
Frankie.
Ruby Gibbleson, $50.
Uhuru.
And Evan Garner, $5.
Uhuru.
So we are at, we have raised $390 so far. We have $610 to go. We can do this. We can do this. And I just really want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And I want us to grasp the significance, the historical significance of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who has fought and struggled his entire life for the liberation of African people, who has never gone a day in his adult movement, finding the ways that African people can and must be free, who hasn't gone without taking on the responsibility on his own shoulders to complete the African Revolution of the 60s and of the 20s, of 100 years ago, as he's saying. And there are a lot of people who want to remember the greats, the African greats of other periods. But this is the revolution of today.
Yes.
This is the revolution that continues through the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela in the face of counterinsurgency, in a time when the revolution was crushed, when nobody was out there anywhere, not even any place else around the world, when the U.S. imperialism seemed to have this power to crush revolution around the world. And and try to bomb people back to, they've said, the Stone Ages, and to take a movement inside the borders of the United States that brought incredible exuberance and a feeling of the future being right here and palpable in the relationship of African people, recognized by other oppressed peoples around the world as the leaders of the world revolution, because it was fighting the revolution inside the borders of the United States that gave white people the ability to begin to see the world as everybody else experiences it the first time. But that much, leaders were murdered, assassinated, organizations were destroyed, and there are many Africans who are in prison today from that period. But Chairman Omali Yeshitela is here now. He has summed up and solved the problems of the African Revolution. What does it take to win? How can African people win? This is what the chairman is working on, thinking about, writing about, and struggling to put, the actual work and projects on the ground that becomes dual and contending power. So just the honor of having Chairman Omali Yeshitela with us today to be able to talk about this, to lay out how, the past is alive because it is a continuation to today, not because it's something in a museum somewhere in Harlem or in an academic library. So because the struggle, it is a part, it embodies the will of African people to be free, which is inevitable that will win in this future, and that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has been instrumental and often alone in this entire world, carrying this message and this understanding. And this is why we have to, as white people, unite with the question of reparations, because this is the future. When we look at the crisis of imperialism that the chairman has summed up, the situation that the chairman's called the uneasy equilibrium, which he has defined as the struggle between the oppressor and the oppressed, between the past and the future, between the inevitable course of history in which African and oppressed peoples will be free, that we see this tipping point, as the chairman says in his political report that he's been reading chapter by chapter, that you can see on YouTube on Burning Spear, the Burning Spear channel on YouTube. You can go there, you can watch this, and you must do that. This is where we can see a future that is beautiful, that we want to be part of. We want to know, white people, I don't know, we hate ourselves because we see what this government does. We see what our complicity is. We see the rest of the world, and we see, what we've participated in doing to everybody else to get our little piece of stolen land and stolen resources. And I think that, because of this crisis of imperialism now, and because of just how false it rings, and because the narrative of African workers and oppressed peoples is becoming the subject of history, not the object of history anymore, that white people are in a crisis and are committing suicide, are becoming, even worse alcoholics and drug addicts than we've ever been, and we've always been that. That the death rate is growing for the white population. But we don't need to do that. We can commit suicide of our nationality. We can commit suicide with our relationship to white power, and thereby come alive in the whole process of just the masses of humanity around the world that is led by the African working class to just create a world in which there is a future, in which science is not made to kill and bomb people, in which science does not come at the expense of the people, but is, science, arts, life, just every culture is thriving, is beautiful. It's for the people, by the people. That is the part we get along. We cannot do that. We have to go through the process to end our relationship as the colonizer, and we have to pay reparations. This is a positive stand. This is not a punitive stand. This is a positive stand in which it enables us to be reborn in a certain kind of way. And I'm very proud to be able to do that. And I just really want to call on white people to heed this call. We have Robert Wood, who's given $25 tonight. We really want to salute Robert, who often gives, week after week. Really, really salute you, Robert Wood. And we only have, $585 more to raise. So we can do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can do this. We have the
Must.
resources. We have the social wealth.
Yes.
We need to put it in there. We need to say that, okay, if I put off a bill, if I do something else, let's put it into blackpowerblueprint.org. Let's raise $1,000 tonight, which is nothing, but which is a little tiny bit that is going to move forward. You should see how these resources are used. And you can see so much on the website, blackpowerblueprint.org, that shows you step by step and pictures and videos, the evolution of this incredible project under the leadership of Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela, carrying out the vision of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party. So go ahead and let's raise the $1,000. Put it in, go to Black Power Blueprint.
Yeah, I think give them the right time to show you when they're in charge, the kind of development that they're interested in, and that's gentrification. That's more colonialism.
Yes.
And as Chairman Omali Yeshitela said earlier, reparations for us as white people it is about righting a historical wrong. It is about that, but it's also about the future. It's also about being part of this brilliant, positive vision of the future where colonialism is defeated, where the colonial white power system is completely overturned, and we have a new social system in the hands of the African working class. I can't think of anything more positive. So if you want to see that vision as well, you can go to blackpowerblueprint.org and help us to make that a reality tonight.
Uhuru.
All right, so we're going to get back to our discussion with Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Chairman, writing about the first convention of the Negro people of the world held by the Garvey movement in Madison Square Garden with 25 to 50,000 people, the New York Times edition of August 3rd, 1920 published an article with these headlines and subheads: Cheering Negroes Hail Black Nation, Free Africa demanded at second day of month's convention in Madison Square Garden. Send sympathy to the Irish. Head of Improvement Association says Negro will fight to acquire land of his own. First paragraph of the article says a mass meeting of a 30-day convention to take up the problems of the Negro race was held last night at Madison Square Garden, where 20,000 Negroes made the Big Hall rock when they yelled for an Africa free from the Strait of Gibraltar and to the Cape of Good Hope, an immense Negro republic officered by Negroes for Negroes. Chairman, even the leading bourgeois newspaper for white power had to acknowledge the state power being declared by African people in the massive Garvey movement. Can you comment on that?
Uhuru, I think that was an extremely important display of the ability of the bourgeoisie, even at that time, as much hell as Africans were catching in this country at that time with the lynchings, murder, the influence of the Ku Klux Klan, actual president in the form of Woodrow Wilson, who was a super imperialist, who had actually invited the guy who is credited with making one of the most successful first movies to the White House that extolled the virtues of the Ku Klux Klan and denounced African people at this time. Even though that kind of stuff was happening, there was still an ability of the bourgeoisie to recognize a legitimacy of African people wanting to have and demanding to have our own country, our own land, our own state, and as they characterized it, our own nation. And I think that's really important. And you got to remember that at the same time this was happening, we had actually had Du Bois, who was fighting like hell to undermine that. There is a sector of the African population that experiences the serious kind of self-alienation as Black people, as Africans, and who would prefer more than anything to be with white people. And that's one aspect of it, the serious kind of self-alienation that a sector of the African petty bourgeoisie experienced, in particular somebody like Du Bois, who credited himself with being the height of Negro erudition. In fact, was a very brilliant person with a major character flaw that was caused by his class outlook, his class view of the world. So, I mean, even the bourgeoisie was able to see that, and the legitimacy of the struggle for African people, though people may not have liked it, the British and all of the colonial powers recognized that it's a legitimate demand. I mean, Garvey actually created the movement ambassadors that actually were received by the British government at one particular time, had our own passports, created passports, created, as you mentioned earlier, the flag, the red, black, and green, created industry and other things that are characteristic of nations and nation states. And the Garvey did that, struggled for that. And it was a real difficult thing that even for them to come up with a contrived basis for arresting and deporting Garvey. Du Bois played a role in that. Du Bois actually tried to get the United States government to provide him with a ship so that he could enter it into the Black Star Lines in some fashion and help to destroy it. Du Bois went on a mission from the United States government to Liberia, where Garvey had secured land, purchased land, and had sent equipment and materials where they were going to establish self-reliance, self-sufficient capacity in Liberia. And it was there that the Garvey movement discovered the rubber trees there that and wrote about it in the Negro World, their newspaper. And that ended up finally, after the U.S. government worked with people like Du Bois and people, forces like the Communist Party and others to undermine Garvey, arrest Garvey. And now that land is owned by Firestone. Today, 2018, that land that Garvey had secured, that land where they were going to extract the rubber for Black people to create our own industry, is owned by Firestone. And what has happened, of course, is with the success, the immediate success of crushing the Garvey movement, it wasn't just something that destroyed an organization, undermined an organization. It was an assault on ideology, on a philosophy. And it was an assault on a philosophy that helped to give rise and significance to Du Boisism. That helped to give rise and significance for a struggle against racism as a struggle, as opposed to a struggle for self-determination, as a struggle for our own government, as a struggle for our own capacity to feed, clothe, and house ourselves, to be an independent people, a dignified people. That's what Garvey fought for. So even then, as we can see, sectors of the bourgeoisie were able to concede the significance of this incredible movement of thousands of people, more than anything Du Bois and the NAACP, the Communist Party. Garvey had more than 900 chapters around the world. That was more than the Communist International, anything like that ever had. People like to refer in our community as Garvey having the largest mass organization of any Black person. It was the largest mass organization on earth, bar none. And that's the struggle for our liberation. And that's the only thing that should make any sense and be meaningful to us. And everybody who claims to love and support Black people needs to support what Garvey tried to do. And you can support what Garvey tried to do 100 years ago. You can support that today with Black Power Blueprint. And the only thing that we want is a new world where our children can have a future. And the fact of the matter is, what is very clear is that the whole white nationalist capitalist system is in a state of extreme distress, extreme deterioration, a state of near collapse. I mean, think about this. It was the American white people who elected this guy, Trump. I mean, and Trump is a good signal about the state of decay in this country. And of course, a good signal of the state of decay is an attempt in 2018 to make McCain some kind of iconic figure for American democracy. It's a state of the decay of Western imperialism and Western society in general, that the Catholic Church is now having to deal today with the rape of children, international rape of children. And of course, we are going to hold the Catholic Church and do hold the Catholic Church accountable for all the rape of Africa and other peoples and countries around the world. We know what they have done to us. We know how they forced Catholicism down our throats, the torture that Black people and the indigenous people in this country went through as a consequence of what the Catholic Church has done. The question is, what kind of society do white people want? And do you want the society where there is this continuing process of alcoholism and opioid addiction and suicide as a consequence of this deterioration? And we're saying you don't have to commit suicide physically, commit national suicide. Abandon your white ways, abandon white nationalism, and unite with the struggles of African and other oppressed peoples around the world. And the best starting point for that is to unite with the Black Power blueprint and the struggles that's being made by the African People's Socialist Party to continue the legacy and the work of Marcus Garvey. And I think there's not much more that can be said about that. This is what needs to be done. And I want to say that we are the 21st century Garveyites. And there are some people who I know call themselves Garveyites and claim to be believers of Marcus Garvey. In my estimation, sometimes they do more to impugn the character and the significance of the Marcus Garvey movement than some of the outright enemies of the movement. Because it's not good enough for us to hang up a photo of Garvey and on August 17th every year to come out and make a speech about Garvey and to dust him off. They're only to be put back on the shelf on the 18th of August. The fact is that Garvey was somebody not because he made good speeches. He was not somebody who had a good plan. He was somebody who was implementing, who was actually doing work on the ground to build the future. And that's what we are saying that you have to do. Everybody has to participate in this process. And that's what makes the African People's Socialist Party such a significant force today, because we are carrying out the blueprint. The Black Power blueprint is a blueprint that was given to us by Marcus Garvey. And so we're calling on everybody to join with that. And white people can abandon your loyalty and your fidelity, your voluntary isolation from the rest of humanity and participate in this process. There's a lot that we have to do. And most of the resources of the people on the planet Earth are in a white community someplace. And so you can turn those resources over. And in turning those resources over, you're not providing some kind of charity to somebody. You're contributing to the ability to create a new world that you might want to live in, and one that you can live in probably without addiction, probably without alcoholism, and probably without the need to commit suicide, because you're living in a world that where the height of morality is to be found in an institution, an international institution that is known more and more today for raping children. So this is an opportunity for everybody to get on the right side of history, and we're calling on you to do that right now. We're calling on you to share this, to get in touch with all the people you know who've got the resources that need to be coming to this process, because this is our time, and everybody who wants to be on the right side of history can join in this process with us. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Uhuru, Chairman. And yes, this is the time to be on the forward side of history, to be on the winning side.
Yes.
If you come under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, you're on the winning team.
Yes.
And this is the place to be. And I want to thank Maureen Wagner, who put in $85, Uhuru, Marissa Laufer, who gives almost every week. We really salute you, Marissa, in Seattle. $25. So we just have $475 to go. We can do this. Go ahead and put in, anybody that can put in $100 right now, go to blackpowerblueprint.org. Anybody that can put in $50, $5, any amount of sand of reparations tonight, we really salute that. Be on the winning side under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And let's give it back to Director Akile Anai to continue with the chairman.
Yes, Uhuru, I just want to salute the chairman. This has been an amazing interview thus far. And, you know, one of the, other than the Black Power blueprint, you know, one of the greatest examples of the party being the 21st century Garvey movement is the fact that the African People's Socialist Party is embarking on its 7th Congress. And that, you know, and we're going to ask you to speak on it in a moment, but that you have characterized this as the most important event in 100 years. And so we just wanted you to talk about the importance of the 7th Congress coming up October 6th through the 12th in St. Louis, and why it's going to be in that city.
Thank you so much for that question, because, it is extremely important. Our party is the only African revolutionary organization that I'm aware of on the planet that is engaged in this process. It's an African revolutionary party of the working class, and it is a party that recognizes the cruel defeat of the Black Revolution of the 60s that saw the revolutionary movement crushed in various places around the world. We saw what appeared to be revolutionary movements in Africa that turned out only to be, for all practical purposes, anti-colonial movement led by radical sectors of the African petty bourgeoisie. We saw, and what's really important about that, in every instance, for most of what we're talking about, these were movements where the African working class and poor peasantry bore the brunt of the oppression and repression. And a shining example of our revolutionary movement, of course, was in Kenya, where we had the magnificent Kenyan Land and Freedom Army led by Dedan Kimathi, that was called Mau Mau, who tied the British Empire up for ages. And this is the kind of example that was represented in that period. And I don't want to act like that what we are doing and what happened in Kenya are the only examples of revolutionary struggles by African people, because workers, the first real working class revolution in history, successful working class revolution in history, happened right there in Haiti. That was the biggest challenge to the entire capitalist social system, because the social system of capitalism does rest on colonialism and slavery. And the revolution in Haiti, the first successful workers' revolution in history, the first successful slave rebellion in history that happened in Haiti, and where after the revolution succeeded, called on slaves all around the world, if you wanted to be free, just get to Haiti. And those who made it to Haiti got land and other kinds of resources in the beginning, of course, until all the white world, including the United States, did an economic quarantine and that strangled Haiti economically, and actually made Haiti pay reparations to France for France's lost property, because France was the slave master, the slave owner, the colonial power at that time, and Africans had to pay France for our own liberation. And what's really interesting about that, and makes what it is that we are talking about and what we are doing today so significant, and this whole struggle against what call themselves communists, that Garvey had an ongoing fight with, and that we've had to fight with physically in this country ourselves, is that one of the most militant expressions of the communist movement was this force called a Spartacus League, first in Germany and then later inside the United States. And of course, Spartacus League was named for the slave in Europe that fought against Roman slavery. But Spartacus lost and was defeated and crushed. And I don't understand why they don't call themselves the Dessalines League. Of course, I do understand, because the Haitian Revolution succeeded. The first successful slave revolution on earth that the white communists could not recognize. It succeeded. Where Spartacus failed, Dessalines and Christophe and the others in Haiti succeeded in making a revolution and defeated Napoleon's finest military force that made it necessary and made it possible and necessary for me to be right here in St. Louis today, because St. Louis and Missouri was part of the so-called Louisiana Purchase that Jefferson made to extend slavery in the United States, and was able to take it for $15 million because France had been defeated by Napoleon and could not defend the territory itself. And so these revolutions, this was a real workers' revolution that happened. And then you had the workers' revolution, peasant revolution that happened in Kenya. But in most other instances, we're talking about revolutions led by the African petty bourgeoisie, certainly on the continent of Africa, and they've been crushed. And the Black Revolution of the 1960s was crushed. And these were struggles where the African workers and poor people bore the brunt of the repression that came down as a consequence. And we call it counterinsurgency, where the imperial powers, they have developed this whole science of crushing revolutionary movements that they call insurgencies, and then keeping insurgencies from emerging. And this science includes everything from psychological warfare, economic and political warfare, and of course, it rests upon the foundation of military warfare. And we saw that happen, and people don't quite understand the significance, the lasting significance of the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 60s, so that you had more than 2 generations of Africans who knew nothing about revolution, heard nothing about revolution, and the first time in such a long period of time, we see that happening is with young African working class forces on Canfield Drive from Canfield Departments rose up in Ferguson in August of 2014. And this was a magnificent uprising. And due to the availability of the internet and things like that, it got away from the bourgeoisie, and they could not contain information about this struggle. And so every sellout in the country, and many from other places, came into Ferguson with their job being to co-opt or otherwise hijack the revolutionary movement that was based in the working class. And they succeeded in doing that, because it wasn't the workers that built this movement on Black Lives Matter. This came from dilettantes from college campuses, and it was carried out and pushed forth by people like Soros, billionaires who spent all kinds of money here into the St. Louis Ferguson area. But the African People's Socialist Party came here too, and we weren't playing. And we organized on the ground among the African working class, to their dismay. And we have fights and contentions even today, because we're rooted in the African working class. In a very short period of time, we began to answer the question. In the middle of every protest, this must be the protest capital of the United States, protests all the time. But the question that could never be asked is, to what end? And that's the question that we have answered in Black Power Blueprint, is an expression of our answer to that question. And the fact is, over many years now, we've been developing cadre forces and that's been our objective, to really develop cadre leaders from the African working class that's really committed to the liberation of Africa and African people, that really believes in African internationalism, that are ideologically, theoretically sound, and that really are committed to this revolutionary project, and where we can send any place to make this revolution. And we sent one comrade that came into St. Louis after we had pulled this organization together. Comrade Omali Yeshitela came in here, and in a very short period of time began the process that acquired what is now the Uhuru House in St. Louis. It's a community center now, where on Sunday at our meetings, Africans come to participate in these meetings to get engaged in work where we've initiated struggles in the community. And St. Louis has become more or less the front line for the reemergence of the African liberation movement in the 21st century. We are here. And it's the reemergence of this movement that has gone for more than 2 generations without being able to articulate a revolutionary program, and create a revolutionary project. And so it is fitting that we should be here in St. Louis, and it is fitting that our 7th Congress should be here in the St. Louis Ferguson area. And while I can't say how large this Congress is going to be, I can say that it's going to be the most significant Congress, the most significant event for the African world since 100 years ago, when Marcus Garvey did this, because the clarity is here now, the cadre is here now, the will to succeed is here now. And the fact is that Africans, despite everything the ruling class has done and continues to do to keep Africans separated, Africans from various places around the world are connected to this project. We are connected to Africans in South Africa. We are connected to Africans in Kenya. We are connected to Africans in Ivory Coast. We are connected to Africans in Sierra Leone. We are connected to Africans in Nigeria. We are connected to Africans in Tanzania. We are connected to Africans in Uganda. We are connected to Africans in South America. We are connected to Africans in the Caribbean. We are connected to Africans all over Europe. And we are connected to Africans throughout the United States. All of us are coming together on October 6 through the 12th for the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. It is the place that we have to be. We are right now in the process of reconstructing the movement that the U.S. imperialists and the imperialists of the world thought they had destroyed when they arrested Marcus Garvey more than 100 years ago and thrust him into a prison and exile him from this country. There's no way you can exile African fundamentalism, African internationalism, because everywhere we are, there also is African internationalism. All African internationalism, everywhere African people are located. And so that's why we are here in St. Louis. That's why the 7th Congress is happening here. And it is the place to be. And everybody who has access to this discussion should find a way to get here. And also, you should contribute to this project, because this is one of the most important projects that the African Revolution is involved in the 21st century. Uhuru, comrades.
Thank you, Chairman, so much. This has been very, very powerful tonight. And we want to thank Maureen Wagner, who put in $85. Marissa Laufer, I think I already announced this. Did I? $25. I'm announcing it again. But I want to say we only have $475 to go. Mm-hmm. Can somebody put in that $75 right now? Put in that $75, and that brings us to $5,000 that we would have raised over the past few weeks. Mm-hmm. So if somebody can go ahead, go to blackpowerblueprint.org and put in $75 tonight. And then we would only have 400 to go. You can go in after this program. You can go in anytime to blackpowerblueprint.org and let us raise that $1,000. And we just really want to salute all the people who have given tonight. Mm-hmm. And Jamie, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Uhuru. Yeah, I just want to echo what Chairwoman Penny have said, and deep appreciation for Director Akile and for Chairman Omali Yeshitela, that incredible overview on Marcus Garvey. We want to see this work continue, and as white people, we know that the resources of African people, of colonized people, are locked inside a white community somewhere. So $25. This is somebody that you can call, that you can reach out to really dig deep and make that donation at blackpowerblueprint.org. Okay. So remember, this is not charity. This is not anti-racism. This is not about diversity. This is about power in the hands of the African working class, and about the anti-colonial struggle for self-government and returning the resources that we know we have in our custody because we've stolen them. And we know this because we have come to take for granted this kind of lifestyle that is the white lifestyle. And we know that it comes at the expense of African and indigenous and colonized people. So thank you to everyone who has made any contribution. And again, do we have a total, Chairwoman Penny?
Well,
anyway, yes, it's coming shortly. Sure it's going to come. Please keep giving from the white community to blackpowerblueprint.org. Go there now. Give all that you can in the name of reparations, in the name of unity with the African liberation movement.
We have some announcements.
Yes. Oh.
Yep.
I'm on the wrong page there. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So, and we also want to invite everyone to join us for the next Black Power Blueprint Live next Tuesday, September 4th at 7 p.m. That's Eastern Time at Black Power Blueprint YouTube and Facebook pages for the Black Community Control of Schools, where we will be discussing the conditions faced by African students in America's schools with teachers and with students. So please check out also and again, that is next September 4th, Tuesday at 7 p.m., Black Power Blueprint on the question of education. And please also, again, check out the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party in St. Louis that was just discussed. Cannot say enough about how powerful that's going to be. October 6th through the 12th, bringing together African people from all over the world to plan the next 5 years in the struggle to liberate and unite Africa and African people everywhere. And to register for that, you can go to apsccongress.org.
APSP.
Forgive me. APSP, as in African People's Socialist Party. APSPcongress.org to register for the 7th Congress. Uhuru.
And again, we have raised $525 tonight. Mm-hmm. And we appreciate that, but we need to get to 600 so that we can break our $5,000 goal. So, somebody please, 3 people can put in $25 more. One person can put in $75. Let's go ahead and get to the 5,000 milestone tonight. I just really want to thank Chairman Omali Yeshitela so much for being on. This has been amazing. This has been so powerful to have this discussion, to see the vision and the analysis from Chairman Omali Yeshitela. I want to thank Agitprop Director Akile Anai for conducting this interview and discussion tonight, which has been so powerful. It's been a profound honor, Chairman. I want to thank our team that puts on Black Power Blueprint Live under Deputy Chair's office. Oh, we have Kristen Fortin, $50. So we have raised $575 tonight. We just need $25 more to get to $5,000 total tonight that we will have raised during the month of August. I want to thank you, Kristen, and so many others. And under the Black Power Blueprint Live operates under the office of Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela. I want to thank Jamie, our MC, Kyle, our videographer and tech person, Mara and Virginia of our mighty social media team, Jackson, our stage manager and appealer, Renee, the assistant producer, and so much more. Amanda, who is our calculator and financial whiz. Lisa, who puts out our amazing weekly newsletters. The Charwa in St. Louis, Kitty Riley, and others who have played a key role in making the projects happen under Deputy Chair's leadership out there in St. Louis. Uhuru Solidarity Movement Chair, Jesse Neville, Uhuru Foods and Pies, Maureen, Bakri, Sayali, and Janice, Ruby of Giving Tuesday, Ali, Ayello, and Raya of the Birthday Fundraisers, and so many more that make this such a dynamic project. We thank you for contributing and taking the stand of reparations tonight. We want to say uhuru to the chairman. Any last few words, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, for us tonight?
Uhuru, comrades, I just think that this is just a really important moment. And I'm hoping that all of us who participated in this and who have the ability to receive this information and this webinar recognize what an opportunity that we have to change the world and take advantage of that. There is no need to be paralyzed and demoralized because the truth of the matter is if we live in a system of slavery, seeing that system in the state of distress should not demoralize us. Anybody who hates slavery should be overwhelmed with jubilation and recognize that it is the appropriate time to resist. So there's no reason for demoralization right now. This is our time. And I'm hoping everybody who has had the advantage of this discussion will seize this time and move us a step closer to the liberation and to the creation of the new world that we have to have if humanity is going to survive colonial capitalism. Uhuru.
Congratulations! See you next week at 7 p.m.